Check, check. Test one, test one.
and good evening, and welcome to the Wednesday, June 12th, 2019 Planning Board meeting for the Town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. We do have a quorum, and we'll start with a roll call.
Mike D'Arcangelo.
Bruce Sanford.
Ed Kranich.
Robert O'Neill,
Greg Foster.
Kyle Bancroft.
Kevin Woodbury.
and with us this evening is our Town Planner, Jim Seymour. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chair if you are unable to see or hear. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We are starting with a public hearing for slideshow disc golf, a sketch plan, two sketch plan reviews, and then a discussion of a site walk for Keystone Investments. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances or state law. All persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the microphone, state your name, address, and affiliation with the application. All persons speaking shall address the chair. Any conversations must be held in abeyance until after the board has formally adjourned. After the board votes on the merits of each applicant, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeals rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regard to a specific application not leave until the board has completed its discussion. Appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the Superior Court or as otherwise provided by law within 45 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual right to file any such appeal, you must be certain that the board records evidences your appearance this evening in opposition and the basis of your opposition, and that would be done at the microphone. All right, the first order of business is the slideshow disc golf public hearing. We'll start, Jim, would you do with just a quick intro?
Yes, this property is located actually on Roosevelt Trail, but it's accessed off the end of Murray Drive. It is in the shoreland zone. It is not part of the Murray Drive industrial. By coincidence, it is the same owners as the Highwire Hydroponics, which is also before you this evening asking for an extension of their approvals. This is simply a very simple application. The owner has this 18 acres of property. They wish to put a disc golf course in there. They'll have parking for up to 30 cars, a small, I don't know if you want to call it a booth or pro shop. They'll sell tickets and have a couple bathrooms in it. And that is essentially it. Most of the disc golf course itself is undisturbed. It'll be serviced by some natural paths. Both Scott and I have looked at it and thought it was a very decent layout and consideration. The only thing that we are missing in tonight's application is some stormwater computations for the parking lot. They have shown you a pond or an infiltration swale, grass infiltration system. I don't know how that's been sized. It appears to be appropriately sized, but I have yet to see the calculations. So I feel it'll work, and we just need to confirm it with calculations and computations. So that'd be something that we might want to hear from the applicants this evening. Other than that, the fire chief has given you a memo as well, has some comments and a few minor concerns. I believe the applicant has received that and maybe can respond to that as well. As I said, this is pretty straightforward. Fits into the property, has very little disturbance because of the natural nature of the golf course. It's not like your typical normal golf course where you have greens and everything. They like the woods and keep it in its pretty much natural state. So I'll throw it back to you and the applicant to further present.
Okay. For the applicant?
Thank you.
Make sure we're live. Is this on?
Heard something.
Is this on?
You're not going to
hear it in here.
You-
Okay, okay, so we'll go that it is, okay. Good evening, Rick Light with Light Environmental Design representing,
Yes,
You just
you
turned it
turned
off.
it off.
let's start all over. For your entertainment and pleasure.
It's a little red switch in the bottom, on the end of it.
I'll be sure not to touch that. Start over. So, Rick Light with Light Environmental Design, through the chair and representing Sideshow Disc Golf. And Adam and Sean are here to answer any questions specific about the project, the other course, and that sort of thing. What I'll do is give you a quick overview of the property, and then I'll show you, walk you through the actual design, what we're doing. So the property is this 18-acre long, narrow piece, 350 feet of frontage on Route 202. And as the board and most of the members will recall, Murray Drive is just north of there. And this was the prior approved building for the high wire, that last lot back in this area through here. And the access to this, the site has frontage on 302. The proposal would be to use Murray Drive to create an access just about in the middle of the site and have a facility for disc golf, which board sort of does a sort of a links type of a course out and back on the front nine and back nine, so to speak. So the property is completely wooded, other than a little bit of clearing that was done some time ago at the front by the, as you've seen by the highway. There's a little high knoll right along the highway here. And it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but these sort of brighter yellow areas are mapped wetlands. Wetlands were mapped by Mark Hampton Associates, and so those were actually field located, GPS located. And the whole intent of what we're looking for the permitting from the planning board deals with this area right here. But I wanted to walk you through what the disc golf course is all about. It's very low impact, as Jim said, but this, I'm going to show you in a minute, the area of actual site plan review is right here. But the way the disc golf, if anyone hasn't played it, maybe some of you have, as Jim said, there's no, disc golf plays through natural settings, it plays through the woods, it plays through and across wetlands. And you go and you can clear out some of the brush and do some brush hogging, clear out some of the trees as necessary to help give you a little airflow for the discs, and you can create challenges by removing and leaving trees. But essentially, it's within the woods. So there's very little disturbance beyond the actual infrastructure where you come in and have the pro shop and parking and that sort of thing. And we do have a couple areas where we will likely have causeway or little boardwalks crossing wetland fingers here. And that wetland disturbance is well under the 4,300 square feet, which otherwise would require a Tier 1 permit from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. So no permits there are therefore required. So the soils on site, we'd use the medium intensity soils. They're all as typical around here. They're all loamy sands to sandy loams, the Windsors and whatnot. So the soils are very excellent. And then the site sort of undulates in terms of slopes, which will really make it interesting for the course, because it's nice to have a little bit of character, playing with some of the knolls, putting tees on high spots and whatnot. And the basic, there's the wetlands obviously in the low areas, and then again it's undulating everywhere else. The way the course works is there's a small tee box, typically 6, 8, maybe 6 feet wide, maybe 8, 10, 12 feet long at most. So you can maybe get 1 or 2 paces, throw your disc. You've got a bunch of different discs. And then the green, let's call it, is really just a basket. It's a basket with a post, and that's pretty much it. And you can place them, you can move them. The only infrastructure with the course itself would be just these small little tee boxes made out of, you can either make them out of gravel or you can make them out of concrete, but they don't do anything that would impact stormwater or any other level. They're so small of disturbance. So that's kind of the big picture on the course itself and the site topography. And as a sense of reference, by the way, and you probably see it in your application from the zoning map, this is in the LRR2, as you're aware, but the lake itself is probably 2,500 feet to Jordan Bay, to the closest point. So we're well away from the lake itself. And so this focuses in on a larger scale. This is the plan that really deals with why we're here tonight, I think, from the larger purpose. So this would be, again, the proposed future high wire facility, which hasn't happened yet, but hopefully will, And this is the end of Murray Drive, and it just comes to a dead end as a gravel road, and there's a residence right here. So the property, basically, what the idea to do is to take and create an extension of Murray Drive for about 125 feet, and we've proposed to widen it to, it's about a 14 to 16 foot gravel drive coming up here. We've proposed with the town's orders to widen it to 22. And I think, Jim, in your memo you mentioned 24, but if the board's agreeable, we were suggesting 22 feet of gravel, so it's consistent with what was approved for Murray Drive, which was 22 feet. And if that requires a waiver from the board, we'd certainly request that the board consider a waiver of that just for 125 feet. And then we would create from this point forward, here's the property line, a driveway, and this is a 24-foot driveway, and a 30-car parking lot, 24-foot aisles, 9 by 18 spaces, et cetera, as a gravel parking lot, and to serve basically sort of a high use. It's hard to estimate what you need for parking with these facilities, but we felt that 30, and Adam and Sean felt, looking at other facilities, that 30 cars would be pretty reasonable for normal use. And then from an infrastructure standpoint, you folks come in, there'll be a small clubhouse or pro shop, and we've sort of set up like a 16 by 18. Final size will be determined and worked through with Scott, the code officer. Possibly a slab on grade or possibly a small, pre-manufactured building, but just a simple pro shop. You come in, you buy your discs, rent your disc, buy any accoutrements, and then it's just walk up and back, ADA accessible, and we did provide 2 ADA handicap spaces. These would be paved to comply with ADA standards, as would the walkway around the building. Everything else would be a gravel surface. And then we've graded the site so there would be some fill in here. The site gently grades off. And there would be, what we're proposing, as Jim mentioned, is this under-drain soil filter to deal with the stormwater. And that really works nicely with the setting here. And this area here is nowhere near the 20,000 square feet, which would otherwise require a DEP stormwater permit. So I think we're around, I'm going to say 10, 12,000 square feet of total. And so that takes care, this would take care of the completely treat all the areas of development. The way the course works, we would basically emanate from the clubhouse building and just have walking paths out to the course, hole number 1, small T, head back out, you finish hole 10, pathway back to the central area here, walk through the parking lot, go to the back 9, or actually 10 is part of the back 9, excuse me, then go to 11, and again, down to the front and come back. And again, all within the woods. So you can see the area of clearing is pretty limited altogether. From an infrastructure standpoint, these guys really want to go green with their project and sustainable as much as possible. And so it's a perfect use for doing that because it's simply a low impact use. To even need much of a building is almost an overkill here if you played disc golf. So the idea would be that we're not extending power. We want to go with PV solar and use that to generate electricity for the building. And we're not proposing any lights within the parking lot because it's a daytime use. And you wouldn't be using it in the winter, but there would probably be one security light on the building, and a down shielded light, and then the electric would be used for the building, generated by PV solar. The only other thing that would require power per se is we're proposing a septic system, a small leach field, and we've toyed with what's an appropriate flow for a disc golf course. You don't get a lot of people using the restroom. There aren't numbers in the plumbing code. So what we'd like to have done, honestly, was to keep it really low impact, was to use like a pit privy. This is a perfect place to use a pit privy, much as you would if you went to a trailhead at National Park or at Acadia or anywhere else where you might have a pit privy, or up in the White Mountains. But however, in your ordinance does not permit pit privies, even the enclosed pit privies aren't open within the shoreland zone, which is. So that was, we met with Scott and Jim, that wasn't doable. So the other thing that we really, I think Sean and Adam would have liked to have done is a composting toilet. Again, very green and environmentally sustainable, and with it's just solid waste. It turns into compost. I mean, what's better than that? The problem with the composting toilets, you can get one for your house, you can have one for your camper, your RV, you have small, actually portable ones. Not too expensive, not too onerous, but if you're going to have one that's a commercial level, like you might go to a rest stop or a rest area,
that sometimes have these green toilets. You need to have a digester. The digester is typically below, which means then also we don't have the ability for a walkout. You're creating a small, single-stall restroom structure on a slab or otherwise. You got to have a full basement to meet OSHA requirements. You got to have basically an 8-foot basement and get down into the basement. Next thing you know, you spent 20 grand just building the structure. You haven't even gotten into the digester and the composting toilet. So we did some research and figured that although that would be a great use here, it'd be perfect for this. Cost-wise, it'd be simpler and easier just to do a standard septic system. So we did a test pit out here. Soils are excellent, and we would have a standard septic system tank, septic tank. And I think this would likely require a small pump. So the purpose of the PV electric also would probably service a small pump to the septic system. And we've sized this based on conceptually based on 200 gallons a day. And, and the final HHE 200 would be submitted, with the code officer. I think that's pretty much it. The areas you see sort of in yellow are the areas of disturbance and grading, and that would all be just loamed and seeded. Other than that, that's pretty much the project, unless there's any other questions or comments from the board. Thank you.
Unless there's any really quick question, I don't think we'll open the public hearing, just,
Well, I do have some questions on the plan.
yeah, we will get to it.
Get to
Yeah.
that? Okay.
So, I will open the public hearing right now at this time. Is anybody that wants to speak for or against the project? Did you guys come in the back for this? Nope, you're, okay. Done. Public hearing closed. That was easy. Okay, now we can go. Bruce, go ahead.
Okay, I did 3 items. The first, the sketch of Murray Drive on the small scale plan. It shows the entire length of the development. It appears that that's the improved Murray Drive over the footprint where it's being relocated. Is that correct, or am I not interpreting that right?
That is correct, through the chair.
I guess my only thought there is because the application says it's usage of the existing gravel drive with 125 feet of widening. I think that should be reflected, and that the proposed Murray Drive overlay shouldn't even be there. It's just not even germane to the project, even though it may happen.
And through the chair, that's a really good point.
Could you use mic, please?
I'm sorry.
My bad. I should know. Through the chair, the Murray Drive, what we did want to represent is the right-of-way for the Murray Drive and all the easements that went along with it. That is deeded and recorded. So the right-of-way that's shown here, that is the right-of-way that now exists. And you remember there was a whole bunch of slivers of parcels. So that's what's on the face of the earth. And I guess if it pleases the board, I mean, the idea was to show Murray Drive. The current driveway is probably right through here at this point. If we could either make a reference to the fact that it follows the existing drive, whatever is the pleasure of the board, if that's a concern, that's going to be using the existing. And our hope is that the board is comfortable with that, because it's a low use until such time as that is constructed, which is another agenda item about extension on that.
I guess my only thought would be to show the outline of the footprint of the existing road, and then dotted line showing the right-of-way, and just let it go at that.
we could
and
do
then
that.
125 feet you want to widen.
Sure, okay.
I think that could also be probably easily documented with a note as well.
Yep.
To your point, show this schematically and then just document as a note.
Yep.
Yeah, he's not required to
Correct.
operate over an improved Murray Road to have his
Right.
his parking lot.
Sure, and we'd be happy to do that.
Apparently, the ADA parking and the walkway to the building are going to be gravel along the parking lot.
I'm sorry, those would be paved through the chair. Those
So
are
the ADA parking and the walkway would be
in would be
paved,
paved. So
but
it's-
everything else would be gravel.
Yeah, and the building would be at grade ADA accessible.
Okay, that should be noted, and of course, we'll need sections on the paving and gravel depths and all that stuff. Then the other issue, this is obtuse, but, I think once the local urchins figure out that there is a disc golf course that's only operated during the day, and it's got a parking lot surrounded by woods out in the middle of nowhere, it's gonna be a magnet for them on full moon nights to go out there and play. And I'm not saying that you should have parking lot lights or a gate or something like that, but it seems to me we have a potential public safety issue that at least we should discuss this. I guess that's my feeling.
Valid concern.
I don't know how
I know-
anyone else on the board feels about that.
If I may inject, I know for their other operations on the other property, they do have a lot of security cameras coming down the end of Murray Drive. So I don't know
Because
if
of the
that,
other businesses already there.
yes.
You want to put a camera?
So I don't know if those could be linked in or how that's monitored to know what traffic flow happens after a certain hour at the end of that street drive.
Again, through the chair, I think that's actually a pretty valid concern. I just checked with the applicants, and they'd be willing to, as a condition of the approval, if the board's going that direction, to put a security camera at the entrance to the facility, and then they would cable that into your current facility, so you can monitor that.
with a motion light or whatever?
Yeah.
to go further?
Either do it through Wi-Fi or do it through a cable extension, so we'd
I
be
don't know
willing
if
to.
that's a planning board thing or whether it's more a town officer thing that you'll just accept a statement that, you know, security will continue down to the end of the road.
Well,
or-
I
or,
think it
you
could
know.
fall under healthful conditions,
Right.
and security would
Yeah.
definitely be something that the board can obviously inject on.
Is Murray Drive a town road?
No,
Private's a
Private
private
road.
way
The
through the chair.
125 feet that you are extending and widening, how is that tied into any road maintenance clubs that are operating?
they
out
would
there?
have to become, that's one of my conditions, was they'd have to
So
be
you'll be
part.
covering that?
Right, they are,
Okay.
they would have to become part of the road
Okay,
association.
all right, fine, okay, that's all I got.
Yep, thank you.
Are there more comments, questions? First, I do appreciate you that through the chair thing, I say that because the lawyers told me I should read that off, but we're kind of informal. So you don't need to say that. But I do appreciate you listening to actually what I said. It's kind of like,
It's a habit.
what, the listening or saying?
No, it's a habit.
Did you see the fire department's memo? Have you got that?
Yes, and we're acceptable to it. It's amazingly detailed, as a matter of fact.
Right, it is.
I only take, and I think I mentioned to Jim on the phone, there's one item that I don't think is applicable. I just want to, for the record purposes, state so. Otherwise, the signage is, this discussion of, smoking areas, combustible waste, the electrical, everything
You
here.
you can sit down. We're not that.
You need the mic, though.
You need the mic, though.
Here we go. Okay, we're getting a program going here. So, the number 10, the ADA provisions shall be approved by the State Fire Marshal Office. I don't know of any requirement, this is such a, that we could be wrong, that the State Fire Marshal has to review this. It's not, there's no footprint requirement that exceeds, the standard, the mandatory. So I don't think that we need to go just to the State Fire Marshal's office. We can certainly confirm that, but there's no reason to think that. The
And that
AD
would, anything for life and safety would fall under the building permit structure itself, so I mean.
It wouldn't be our item anyway.
Right, it would be your.
It'd be life safety, standard life safety 101, which the
As
chief
long
would
as
be
you have
reviewing.
ADA accessibility from the parking lot to the structure, anything else inside is under
Yeah.
the building permit.
Everything else in here you're okay with? Because I know this,
We're fine with everything else, yes.
it had where was it? It wanted a little wider space for the,
Yeah, the only thing that I spoke
the
to,
access.
I spoke to Wayne this afternoon, and one of his other concerns was to make sure that his UTV would have accessibility to those holes.
Yep.
So they need to have the paths at least 6 feet wide, and any bridges or structures that you have going over wet areas or anything like that would have to be 6 feet wide.
You can do that? Okay, yep, that's fine.
okay.
The other thing that, and just to answer Jim's question, the 10-foot space, yeah, we have no problem with that. We would just make a minor adjustment on the final plan. Just,
Again,
yeah.
I don't have a preference whether they're
It's-
9 by 18 or
yeah.
10 by 20, as long as the aisles are consistently 24. That
Yeah,
was the
they
only
are.
thing, again, the Wayne had a question about was and I think I may have also misled him a little bit with that too. I know Murray Drive, one statement says, one dimension shows 20, and then I think another leader shows 22.
It's 22, that was a mistake.
22, but
yeah.
I think we had shoulders as well, correct?
Yeah.
So I think overall, you've got more than 24 feet to get down through there. And I think that was the conversation I was having this afternoon, that whatever they did to extend would be consistent with what we did with
Consistent,
Murray
yes,
Drive.
yeah.
So I think he's okay with that, just as long as there's, 24 feet of surface that he can get the fire truck in, should he have to get in
Yeah.
there.
And again,
Okay.
just to be clear, we're talking a gravel extension, that's what's there now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I got a quick question there. I noticed on some of the letters from the fire department, they talked about road pitch and degrees and this and that. is that at all applicable to the existing conditions of Murray as far as the way it sits right now? That, do we have anything from the fire department that says the existing road as is acceptable for extension to
We
a
don't, he only looked
parking
at
lot?
what they were extending, coming off the end there now. Obviously, later on this evening, there's a proposal to extend the original approval, which was for all the improvements on Murray Drive. I mean, that's something you can put there as a condition that, you know, prior to occupancy, the fire department shall sign off on accessibility.
I think we need that as a condition, yeah,
Didn't we look at
that
Murray
they'll
Drive?
accept Murray Drive as existing
Right.
for fire truck access.
But didn't we look at Murray Drive the last time this came to the board?
Well, for the improvements,
Right,
I
but
don't know if we
Oh,
look.
oh, okay.
The
Yeah,
improvements
but
have
we're
not
not
been
improving
made.
it
Right,
right now.
right,
It's-
okay.
There
We're
is-
being
there
asked
is-
to accept an existing road with some widening
Right.
and extension, and the fire truck still has to get over it.
Yep, okay.
And I believe there is adequate gravel surfaces to get down there, because they're pretty wide when you get to the end. But
Very
to your
wide, yeah.
point, it would make sense that at least, you know, that there's a lot of fire items there that the fire department sign off prior to occupancy to include access and
I think we need
maneuverability.
a note from them, something to that effect, yeah.
For what it's worth, they've been there several times and have no issues, so, up the road anyway.
The fire trucks have been there several times?
Yeah. False alarm, well,
Oh,
no. Truck fire one time. Damn Fords.
30 parking spaces, just a swag based on some sort of research, you said?
Just it was kind of a looking around, they've looked at other courses. I mean, the things that would generate high use, if you imagine like, I've done a lot of golf course design, you take 18-hole golf course, you figure if there were maximum two foursomes on every hole, you
Yep.
know, and if you didn't have an event going on, you do some math and you come up with a number. But something like this, it's typically, you don't get this big delve of people coming in, they come and they go, where you have issues of, if you had a tournament, you know, you might need to park along the edge of the road or something like that once in a while, and they probably, you know, come to the town. But I think 30 seem to be reasonable, guys. I mean, yeah. So,
Reasonable because,
Because if you had, you know, 30 people on the course at any given time, that's probably about average. I mean, assuming everybody drives their own car, and again, like that's on a fairly busy time. If you had 100 people, most courses around here, I'd say in North Yarmouth, wherever, have 100 people throughout the day on a pretty good day. So I can't cite any exact facts about that, but I've played a fair amount and talked to a lot of these owners.
yeah,
I'd say, you know, on the weekends you might be a little busier, but 100 people a day is, I'd say, about your average. And again, that's, you know, 15 to 20 cars in the parking lot at any given
that's
time.
right, over the
Okay.
course
And how
of
long
the
does it
day.
take to typically play a round of disc
Hour and
golf?
a half, 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Filtering through pretty quick.
depends on how well you throw. and how-
Oh, yeah.
You can spend a lot of time in the brush. You know, that's why actually bush hog. You can spend like in golf. You can spend a lot of time looking for your disc.
So you mean if I play, I'll come out with more frisbees than I went in with?
Yeah, you might. Yeah, you might do that.
so, so now my concern then is on the parking with emergency access.
Yep.
If there is where or would overflow parking go? And would that overflow parking impede emergency access into the facility?
If if there was an event or a need to do something like that, the logical place, if you'll bear with me, and it wouldn't be very frequent, would be, since they own this lot right now, it currently is all gravel. It's all, you just park on that lot right there. Otherwise, they would have to use like the next building down, which they owned, and use like on a weekend. It'd be a weekend facility. Use that building where it's not being used on the weekend.
The chief and I, Wayne and I did discuss, the inspector and I did discuss that he would like to see some no parking signs
was my
along
next.
the,
Yes.
the driveway coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're not supposed to park on Murray, I don't think there's no parking on Murray Drive, but at least the driveway coming in so that he could at least get down Murray Drive and he would be obstructed in case people park on both sides of the driveway, so he
Right.
wanted the driveway. The other piece to that too is where, looking at it tonight and understanding, where people come off of 9 and then go to hole 10, they're cutting across that throat
Yeah.
coming into the driveway, and just for site accessibility, it may be warranted to have some kind of signage saying throwers or participants crossing or something there, just because there will be quite a few people crossing right there.
Right through here. No, actually, Jim, that's a good point, and we could do that. We'll make a note on the plan to put a sign there for, you know,
Yeah,
pedestrian
just something to-
pedestrian crossing sign.
Or put a speed limit
Yeah.
sign or something to slow down warning.
Okay.
Bob? On a tangential issue that Bob mentioned about overflow parking, I'm not trying to throw up roadblocks, but I'm just, one thing that concerns me, we heard some statements about historical disc golf course usages and load levels and how many cars a day and stuff. I just know from playing golf that if you have an 18-hole golf course and if you have 2 foursomes on every hole, that's 72 people, or 144 people
yeah.
right there, which if people come 2 in a car, that's 70 cars. Worst case,
Right,
okay?
right,
And so what provisions do you have, or do we need fallback provisions based on a, 12-month vehicle count that gives us information as to actual loading of the parking lot? If overflow becomes a problem, what logical extensions
Right.
of that parking lot could you include or maybe impute on the plan if that becomes an issue for your own protection,
Fair question. I don't know, guys,
We own
Yeah.
we own every property next to that,
Yeah.
that lot, if you
Yeah.
flip that around.
yeah,
Directly across the street, we haven't done anything with that zone, where there's the hammerhead to turn around for high wire.
these are vague,
He's gonna have to use the podium.
Yeah.
use the podium, I'll use this, how's that?
All right.
Tag team it.
Could you just give us your name and all that kind of good stuff?
Adam Nappy, anything else?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. We own the 2 big, lots
Yeah.
right there, and we bought Dean's building, so that's right
And it's
there.
right here.
And then we own right next to that,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is up,
Yeah.
And of course, we own the high wire spot there.
Is the lot on the left that shows that little driveway squirreling into it, is that, I drove up there and I saw a house that looked like a basketball court and a big dog standing on it or something?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that upper left-hand lot right
Yes,
there?
it is.
Is
right
that
here.
yours?
Or that's a
No.
little farther on, okay?
That's a
It's
home.
private lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the squares are ours.
Gotcha.
What's not
Yeah.
there, the
This,
30
this,
acres,
this.
but
Okay.
that's a home there, yeah. So if need be, of course, we get the high wire building, it's gonna go up some point, but where the hammerhead there, if need be, overflow, that's all leveled now, that can be overflow parking there.
That makes sense.
Down the road, if we ever do anything with that, who knows, but we also have, like I said, Dean's building now, and then we have a large property with a ginormous parking lot right there.
Yeah.
I don't know how formal the board wants to get about, a potentiality of that, and do we need signs out there that say overflow parking? I don't know if you even want to get into that, but it's just, we're kind of opening up a little side issue here.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately for recreational uses like this, we really don't have any parking standards to match up space requirements to parking needs. And we rely on the applicant to provide us evidence as what they think is appropriate. My guess is that if that parking lot starts filling up frequently, from a business model, obviously they're gonna wanna go and find parking somewhere else. I don't know if the board wants to entertain that we can monitor this for a year and see how the parking is working. I mean, we're gonna rely on their evidence. We're not gonna walk out there every day and check the parking.
Right.
Well, we do have a residence that we need to be.
Right, and
cognizant of.
as you were saying that, I was thinking, again, that gets back to the whole signage about, private driveway.
Right.
And we'll need a sign plan of something here to monitor this, that no parking, private driveway, and then
Right.
no parking along the driveway itself going into this facility. But I think as if to your point, if they've got a backup plan at this point, I think that's acceptable to us. If that becomes a permanent fixture though, we'll have to have that permitted, because that's a gravel surface, impervious surface, which will count against you in your endeavors on the other side.
Right.
So, I
So
think
how do
I
we
think where they
determine
own
when it
both
becomes a
properties,
problem?
where they have both properties, they don't have the hydroponics building in there now, obviously you can park in there, that's not a big issue. But going forward, when the hydroponics get built, then it might be something we wanna look at again at that point, if there is no overflow, or at that point, do they provide us more information to one of those other lots to the north?
North. Perhaps a note on the plan simply stating that should additional parking be required due to operational needs, that the board recognizes that this lot could be used temporarily for that. And even if you wanna put a sunset on it,
Right.
excuse me, saying after a year of operation, if they wanna come back and review it, if it's been an issue, obviously, these guys are gonna be concerned about it, because it's gonna affect their business.
Right.
If they need to come back for some formalizing of that, I think that would be reasonable.
Yep.
Excuse me.
I do have one question. If we do have a tournament currently, and there's absolutely no parking on Murray Drive? Or can we have a permit saying there's parking, or we can just have the tournament one day and people can park along Murray Drive, considering that it's 24 feet wide?
In the inspector, it shows the unobstructed 20-foot access road and driveway to be listed as a fire lane.
Right.
So that, I don't think
Answers that
that
question.
bends or with a tournament or anything. I mean,
Not on the driveway section, but Murray Drive, I think, is the question, you know.
Sure.
this is access road and driveway.
Yeah, but they don't own, they get permission to access over Murray Drive, they don't own Murray Drive.
Okay,
They do,
Well,
but
we
not
do.
this particular, they do, but not this LLC they own.
yeah.
I think that maybe we have language in there, there's a tournament, they need to come to the town with a parking plan. I think it'd be that simple.
Should be pretty
Yeah,
straightforward,
yeah,
just get a
straightforward.
temporary
Yeah,
sign,
Right.
that makes
you know,
sense. If you have a big event, you just.
load parking.
If you
Yeah.
come to the, if you have a tournament
Yeah.
event, you just need to provide the town with evidence of overflow parking.
Okay, right.
I mean, it could be even off-site, and they might shuttle them, we don't
Mhm.
know, but I mean, there has to be a plan or something to that nature. And they own a couple businesses down there, I'm sure they have adequate parking for a tournament event, which would probably be on a weekend,
Most likely,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah, or after hours or something, and probably not in the
Yeah.
middle of the day, but
And
if it
that
is, then you just need to provide us an overflow parking plan.
Sure, and that would go to the code, go to Scott, to the code
That'd
officer.
go to
and your-
Scott,
yeah,
correct.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
And just put a note on the drawing to
Yeah.
that effect.
We're agreeable.
Okay, anybody else? No.
I would just comment
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
that I think it would be wonderful if you guys get so busy, you're having tournaments that create these kinds of parking issues. And really, it's for your protection in the event there's some sort of emergency, and heaven forbid an emergency vehicle couldn't get down there, and it made the difference between life and death. That's what we're all trying to avoid.
Sure, yep.
Very understandable.
Now, I'm probably gonna shoot myself in the foot, but this is along the same permitting. We always throw a barbecue at the high wire every year, and we sometimes have a little overflow parking. Should we get permitting for that, or?
So easy to not say that.
I know, but
Again, if you can, keep them off Murray Drive, that's all I'm gonna tell you. I
10-4.
mean,
Yeah.
It's no different than any other private road. We don't police every private road in town.
Right.
You know, but from a practical standpoint, the fire department would like to have Murray Drive free and clear.
I think the really
Yep.
only major concern would be is if it gets blocked.
Right.
yeah, it's never been blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, anyone else on the board? Good questions? The leach field design and calculations,
Stormwater.
no, this is back to leach field for, you said 200, it's a 200-gallon system.
The septic system is a 200-gallon, I believe a 200-gallon-a-day system.
What, I mean, I don't, someone who knows more than me, what is that, how does that equate to a home, a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom?
A 3-bedroom home would be 270 gallons. Typically, a home design is 90 gallons per day per bedroom. We design houses
Okay.
off bedrooms.
So, I'm thinking if we're looking at, if 30 parking is about right, you're looking 60 to 90 people, 200 gallons, you're looking about, you know, what, 40 flushes?
Something
That's,
like- yeah, it's not-
that's not very many, especially if you're going to hold a tournament. It's going to get, and you're gonna be, you know, that's not a lot of usage. Well, you know, I'm assuming this is a single seater is the plan?
Yes, this would be a single unisex bathroom, and I'm going back to look at my flow calcs. And the plumbing code has provisions, let's just say, if this was a pit privy, if it was permitted, there are provisions for what they call limited systems. And
Mhm.
they give you a guidance on, you can actually do a 200-gallon a day. And to be clear, I didn't mention, but it's in the application, we're talking about this. We're not proposing a well. There's no, you know, this is gonna be a small tank and then just hand wash, you know, which is permittable by the plumbing code. So I think the direction we took, I'm looking for my calcs, it's probably in my file, but we did, I think we used one, like recreational facility under the, table 4 of the, 50 gallons a day, I caught me off guard, but we used table 4 on the plumbing code. and I think we used recreational facility, and it's something like 2 gallons a day per person or something like that. I don't have it right in front of me, but I could certainly provide that to Jim if the basis was. You know, so that, and that would go through HIG to 100 to Jim. And we could certainly up that if or Scott feels that we need to up that. We could certainly, we've got the room, we got the
Oh,
soils.
yeah, I know you have the room.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, but
and
we,
it's-
but to be clear, we typically don't design a system like that for your peak event. In a peak event, they would get a
Right.
permit for a porta potty. I mean, I would think that would be the way you typically go, because otherwise you're over-designing it for a once.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the way most sporting venues operate, you know, Little League or anything like that.
Right.
If they have a tournament event, they
Yep.
bring in porta potties.
Okay.
So that, again, maybe you have a small section here that you just have, you know, large scale events and you have a note about parking and you have a note about wastewater
Right.
on the site
Okay.
plan.
We could add a note to that effect, yeah, for events, to make it clear that system size for normal use based on the following. Any events are anticipated to have porta potties and secure a permit for porta potty. Would be happy to put a note in the plan.
Okay. And could you just, and when you're doing that, would you, in that final submission, would you just give us a little bit of how you calculated it?
Yeah, so we'll put the calcs right
Okay.
right in the note, yep.
And now, then my next is the electrical demand. It's gonna be solar to battery,
It's a solar to battery, PV system for that.
and there'll be some calculation as far as the amount of amps being drawn by both the pump for this system, the CCTV camera now,
Right.
and,
That would be based on, yeah, the electrician based on electrical code and would have to do that. We do a lot of solar work and other projects and like with revision. And they typically go through all of that, you know, especially with net metering and they'll calculate
Yep.
that. As far as the camera, I'm just sticking my neck out here. The camera, if they're gonna put it at the entrance, could either be on a battery basis or solar basis, either way, or
Either way.
cabled from the nearby building, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Just as long as we have, there's some,
Basis for it.
yeah, there's some basis
Yeah.
for the amount of, the sizing of the electrical
Yep.
to the
Yeah.
load that you're anticipating.
And I do believe that the chief mentioned that too, but he referenced some codes here basically that I'm not familiar with under the electrical code about using photovoltaic systems.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
All right. Stormwater was the only one that I had.
Yeah.
yep.
And have you had any conversations with Walsh Engineering? I think who's gonna be doing
Yeah,
that for you.
and what I did is, actually, it's sized based on the DEP handbook, we just didn't get into the calculation, so it does meet the standards. We will provide, if the board's agreed, like you mentioned in your letter, Jim, we're working on the calculations now and the pre and post for that area, and we'll have a stormwater calculations and a final letter report for that, like in the next week or so. So if that's acceptable to the board, you know, comfortable, it's sized to more than meet even the DEP standard of treatment, which isn't even required on this location, so I think we'll be fine with that sizing. If the board's comfortable with us providing that information to Jim.
Yeah, and if they do provide that, that will meet our standard for phosphorus export as well, meeting the
Right.
DEP standards.
Right. So we don't have to go through the number, if we meet that standard, we don't, according to your ordinance, we don't have to go through the number standards, which we easily meet, by the
Right.
way, your phosphorus
You
numbers.
either have to meet our point system or you have to provide sizing per DEP regulations. So either one.
Either one, okay, because I think the 50-point system, we're well over that if we yeah. We
Either
can do
one.
it both ways, okay.
Any other questions from the board? Okay.
Oh, I do have one question. When I just happened to notice it tonight by chance. Address confirmation. We've got, the property has a Roosevelt Trail address attached to it because its frontage is off Roosevelt Trail, but it's going to be accessing off of Murray Drive. So just for E911, you know, and emergency response, I'd like to have the address,
On Murray Drive.
yeah, from Murray Drive or some kind of confirmation of how we're gonna address this, because right now it's destination unknown. So I don't know, would that be through Kayla?
We'll talk to Kayla about that.
Okay, 'cause it's a weird situation where it has frontage on
Yep.
one road and comes through another. But I think it'd be appropriately, should be Murray.
Yeah, I would certainly agree.
I would think so, because we do a lot, where's the drive, where's the
Right.
driveway, where's
Right.
the access to
Right.
the property itself?
Right, under E911.
Okay, so the first thing I would need would be a motion deeming the application is complete, so that we can move on.
So moved.
there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so the application is complete. The application has to be approved under both our site plan and our shoreline. I think we have discussed most of the stuff already that is in the site plan. We've got the surface water drainage we've just discussed, right? And you're okay with that, Jim, on getting those
Stormwater?
stormwater?
Yeah, as long as they provide which they're going to do. I mean, the sizing for that would be what we request.
Okay.
That's a technical issue that I can address with, I think Silas is the one that's gonna be doing that for you. Silas Carrot.
That's our fault. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I understand.
There's a note here that says the applicant is planning to go green with the use of photovoltaic source of power to operate lighting. I think you said there will be no lighting, is that?
Well, they have one outdoor light.
One security light.
One security
One
light.
security light,
Yeah.
okay. Other than that-
Building mounted, right?
Building mounted.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's no plans for any lighting?
No, there are
Okay.
not.
That seemed to be the only outstanding issues in the site plan review portion. Does anybody else have it? Instead of, I'm trying to avoid having to go through this piece by piece, since we kind of discussed this already.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to kind of keep track of the potential conditions here.
Mm-hmm,
And one I have is the plan note talking about the actual Murray Drive location versus the proposed, a note clarifying that. You wanted to note about the ADA being paved.
no, that's in.
Which it actually does say so in your review.
In my review,
Yeah.
right, but I'm just saying that
But I-
on the plan
Yeah.
itself.
It's on the
But I think it's on,
Yeah, I think it's on the plan. Don't
think
you have
it's
it on
on
the
the plan.
plan,
Yeah,
Dave?
it's called out as being paved.
Okay,
so that one we don't have to worry about.
right.
Security cameras
The
installed.
width, excuse me, the width might have to be changed, though, for the ADA parking. That's on,
Yes,
from the plan.
We'll make that change as part of our final plan set that we submit.
Yeah, okay.
Security cameras for nighttime security.
Mm-hmm.
Fire department, review of accessibility and maneuverability prior to occupancy. Let's see, I got extension, extension in parking, for special events or tournaments, overflow parking.
Right.
Wastewater design, appropriate, calculations for sizing. And you wanted, calculations for solar to battery use.
Right.
And stormwater.
Somewhere, okay. Did we miss anything?
Are we gonna require no parking signs on Murray?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that would
Yes.
be, well, that's part of the fire department. We should just add that in compliance with the fire department's review.
With the exception of note 10, because I think we've all agreed that that's not a requirement in the fire department.
Oh, the ADA,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think,
the
State
state
fire
fire marshal
right, I
review.
think we've all,
Yeah, and again, I think that all comes back to Scott in the end anyway.
okay. But if we're gonna add that, I think we should delete
Okay.
out, just so we don't.
So per fire inspector's review, deleting item 10?
Yep. I believe it was item 10.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's move to, let's do it all at once. Let's move to the shoreland zoning.
I think you end up with a duplicate of almost the same.
Almost everything, yeah. It starts on page 5 of Jim's memo.
Not in a floodplain. Doesn't impact shore cover. Do you have under the shoreline, and I don't think the site, but do you have a SHPO letter or?
No, we have requested it, so if you want to make a condition, we're happy, and I apologize, I know it was in the ordinance, and we just didn't get that letter, so we requested it, and the SHPO now
I know.
You do US mail, you can't do email.
I know,
Yep.
I know the pain.
Yeah.
So it would be just subject to the receiving confirmation of the State Historic Preservation letter. I don't expect
Okay.
we're gonna have everything come back, but you never know.
You never know.
So shoreline zoning is subject to receipt
Right.
of SHPO letter. Okay. All the other points from the shoreline zone basically carried over from site plan.
Okay, yeah, I don't see any. there's nothing-
Wastewater and stormwater all carried over
Got
from
it.
site plan.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion on the application? Board, to be happy? Go ahead, Greg.
All right, let's see. Move that the application be accepted as written with the conditions so noted by our planner, Jim Seymour.
The best way to do it.
Yeah.
I think we should have Greg list them all, don't you?
Oh, no.
No, all right.
See if my notes are correct. You don't want that.
We'll have the findings of fact next meeting anyway.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Okay, that's passed.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You know, I think we have a correspondence where you're here, I believe, right? Isn't that where we have that?
Oh, for Highwire?
Yeah.
you
let's
wanna do
just-
that
Yeah,
right
let's
now?
knock that right out.
Okay.
Because they're all
They-
here.
they- It's very simple. It's a request for another year extension on that approval that they obtained. The only thing would be is that the conditions relating to the road improvements, I don't know if we had those in months, Rick, or whether those were specific dates.
They were, I think they were in the timeframes and related to the building construction.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's still, I've got the plan right here.
The only suggestion would be is that those have to be referenced back into the new extension based on reference. Because it was, the improvements on the road were based on timelines. There's a certain period of months to finish
Right,
X,
Right.
Y, and Z. And that's the only thing that just needs to be confirmed,
okay.
which we can do. And again, we'll give you another,
Fact finding, fact.
yeah, we'll give you just maybe just a summary of what that means and have you sign it.
Okay, all right. But we do need a vote, though.
Yes, you do.
So does everybody understand the issue? So under our, kind of our sunset clause, the approval that the board gave for the, to Highwire would most likely expire before the actual construction gets underway. So the board set this process up so that applicants would have to come back to the board in case things have changed. We would get a chance to review. So an application wouldn't sit out there for 10, 15 years, and then as a current a current application, that thing could be kind of implemented. So it's just, this really is just a procedural type of vote. In this case, we're gonna extend it for, we want to extend it for a year, and hopefully it'll be done by then, but there's been no real changes, as far as I know.
No changes, all the conditions that went with the original approval will apply. All we'll just do is make sure if there are dates that we reference those in to be correct.
No, I meant, but there's no ordinance, we've got no ordinance changes that have effect, because I haven't been here for a year.
No,
No,
No.
okay.
no, nothing in this one would be affected. Actually, what we did do is we clarified the language for the sunset provision, actually, so that's the only
Okay.
change.
Can I get a motion then to extend?
Well, I have
do you have a discussion?
first of all, just a quick note. I think that any language for approval of the extension should include a statement that the extension does not in any way affect any of the specific conditions on the approved site plan related to the timing of the construction of Murray Drive and site improvements. Rick, in his letter, he says, while indeed there are specific conditions on the approved site plan related to the timing of the construction of Murray Drive and site improvements, which arguably are tied to the issue of final occupancy permit, there seems to be that does raise the question of what are the specific conditions. I don't remember. And by granting an extension, are we doing anything that impacts any of the specific conditions? I don't know. If we're going to grant an extension, I think we should be clear that we're not allowing the extension to overturn any of the specific conditions on the approved site plan related to the timing of construction of Murray Drive and site improvements, other than an extension of time.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it. It's
No,
just
no,
extension.
no tangential.
No, we're just
offset.
extending the
No,
time.
they're separate. They're
Everything
actually-
else stays in place.
Yeah, even though these two are, they own the same properties, they're two distinct LLCs.
Oh, okay.
So what they do is what they do, and the other one is subject to its own, so they're all subject to their own individual terms.
Yeah, so we're essentially, we're simply extending the approved plan with all its verbiage.
Correct.
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 Yep.
Is there anyone else, any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve that.
You approve and extend the plan for, I don't have it in front of me. For, yeah, for 1 year.
It's on the,
2020.
You have the exact,
Is it in 2-year increments, or we're extending it to
1 year.
2021, or
for 1 year.
1 year?
1
So
year.
it'd be
2020,
July 12,
July.
2020.
Yeah, it's for
2000,
high wire
okay.
hydroponics.
Until July 12th, 2020. Right? Is that your?
Correct. 12th of July,
Yep.
2 years, yeah.
Any other, oh, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Okay, no one opposed, done.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Dustin, thank you for your patience. You were going first and you wound up going last, yeah.
Leave that for you. Thanks.
He almost went first. He
Almost,
was-
yeah,
I
almost
went
counts.
first. Almost. went first.
Right, something.
Horseshoes.
Horseshoes, that's it. All right, so up first is the sketch plan review for Nicholas Road,
Nicholas Drive.
Nicholas Drive.
Sorry about that.
That's okay?
Transposition, I claim transposition.
So you actually, I'm sorry, I'll let you get your packet.
Oh, it's right in front. Yep, okay, go ahead.
You actually saw this back a few years ago.
Oh,
It came in.
memory
for-
check, huh?
Yeah, memory check. It actually came in, it never went anywhere. It came in, it got tabled. They were looking to do very similar, extend the road, maybe not quite in the same fashion, but very similar. And it just kind of died. So it's back before you now. The first part of Nicholas Drive has been built. We're not exactly sure to what standard. That's part of the discussion that we'll want to have.
That's the old file.
Yes, it was Cassie
Steinlosk.
Steinlosk was the applicant way back when. But anyway, so part of the condition would be we want to see what the condition of Nicholas Drive is as far as depth and width and things like that, and the engineer will have to confirm that. But they're looking to extend this into, deeper into the lot. This would be to build two, Dustin? Two lots, even though the rear lot is really 2 lots. If they build those within 5 years, that would require a subdivision, so they've combined the 2 lots on the end to one for now. At the end of 5 years, they want to come back in, they can extend the road again, or if they can't wait 5 years, they have to come in for subdivision. But as it stands right now, we have 2 lots looking to do this road improvement. It would be built to a private road standard because there's already 2 houses that access this, so now you're in that 4 lot, and that requires a private road, so that's why they're here before you this evening. I think Dustin's pretty much followed the same course of action that they were leading to before as far as stormwater treatment. It all runs downhill to the end. Looks like he's got some buffers there on the end that he's going to use as treatment before going into a wetland off near the turnaround. The turnaround is a hammerhead that has been designed to meet the town standards for a private road. And it didn't show it, but I'm not sure whether you're going overhead or underground with power. That'd be something we'll need to see on the final drawing as well. think that's pretty much it. I know Dustin will get into a little bit about the front end of Nicholas Drive and why they've got to do what they do. There is a property that is to the east that I don't think has direct access, or doesn't have direct access to this road. They're not part of the land ownership, but do they have rights to access this road in the future?
You talking about this lot here?
Yes.
It's actually all part of this one lot. It all loops right around. So this house lot, or this dwelling here, is all contiguous and part of that lot.
Okay. So again, if the way they're building the road, they're building it to the 4 to 10 lot design standard for the private road. So it wouldn't be an issue unless, of course, they chop that lot up into several lots, and then we'll have to monitor, once they go over 10 lots, the road design meets another standard. So with that, I think it's pretty straightforward. My suggestion would be, obviously ask them some questions this evening, but they've already submitted, they just missed the deadline before, so I think we'd like to get them back on for a public hearing in July if we feel it's appropriate.
Okay.
Just a sketch plan tonight. You don't need to make any decisions other than maybe move it forward to a July hearing.
All right, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jim. So Dustin Roma, DM Roma Consulting Engineers, and I'll just, that was a pretty good summary of kind of where things are at, but I'll expand on a couple of things. So there are 2 existing dwellings that utilize Nichols Drive currently for the portion that's already been built. There's an existing right-of-way, which you can see here has a turnaround that was put together on a plan. Wasn't actually built out to this location. They basically built the road out to the point where it provides access to this second lot here, and it's been cut, and there's some remnants of kind of the intent of a road beyond there, but it really kind of was never formalized in this area. So there is a right-of-way which was designed on paper. It's in a recorded plan in the registry, which is that drawing that was included there in the packets, which shows the 50-foot right-of-way extending along the property here of land of Grover, and then at that point it transitions into the 2 lots that are proposed to be developed at this time from Andrew Lane, Walter Brown. So we're building the road through that existing right-of-way, and we're creating this hammerhead turnaround here at the point before we're crossing kind of this big drainage that runs down through there, where at this time we're not proposing to develop that 3rd lot. It would be quite a bit longer beyond there to provide frontage to do so, and it would also entail subdivision review through the planning board, so we're looking to just develop these 2 lots at this time and really just kind of pull the road back to not have to go through and cross that big drainage area that runs through there. At some point, if they intend to develop that 3rd lot and split it, then the road would need to be extended, and the right-of-way is certainly there to do that. So the stormwater management scheme for the project is really to kind of take this proposed 22-foot wide gravel road, collect the stormwater in a roadside ditch down through here, and then construct a ditch turnout buffer with a level spreader along the downhill side of the road here, and then we would maintain a forested buffer in an area that's really nice and flat as it kind of approaches down in through that wetland area, so it's pretty well suited for it. As we said, the standard for the road is proposed for the 4 to 10 lot private road standard in the ordinance, so there is additional land kind of surrounding this, but there's certainly, we're building it to the standard, which would accommodate further development if anybody were to pursue it in the future. We'll prepare a road maintenance agreement and submit that to you folks for review that would deal with maintenance of the roadway. Pretty much have a building envelope designed here for this first lot, and then it's really pretty much right here for this second lot. There's this wetland swath that runs down through here and then continues on. What's shown here that's a little bit different than what you've seen in your plans is in talking with Jim and looking at Scott and looking at the zoning requirements for frontage. We're going to propose a land swap where the actual ownership of this hammerhead is going to be conveyed to the Walter Brown parcel, and then a triangle of land up here will be traded back with Andrew Lane. That would be an even land swap between the two, but that would provide the necessary frontage at the end of the roadway for this back lot. And again, we're just trying to cut it short of having to get into that wetland area at the end of the road. We've calculated some kind of phosphorus treatment calculations based on the town's point system, kind of a prorated approach. Provided some of that information in your packets, and we'll certainly work with Jim and make sure that it's meeting all your standards. Get a erosion control plan pulled together for this. So yeah, I think kind of a summary where we're at for now.
Okay.
If I may. I think the other thing that would be helpful to the board, Dustin, especially now where you're doing the land swap, is that overall plan that Wayne Wood had prepared before, which I think is recorded.
Yes.
I think that would be beneficial because obviously you're gonna have some land swaps now, and it gives them a sense of how these lots lay out overall. Even though it's not subdivision under the private right-of-way, I think we do request to see, or at least make sure that there's passing soils on the lots we're kind of creating by this, so.
Yeah.
If you've got that information, just put that on the plan as well. And I'll let the board chime in from there.
Have we not allowed, I mean, I know we have allowed a right-of-way to act as road frontage that's not developed.
We shouldn't, it should be improved roadway to have lot
We
frontage.
shouldn't do that anymore?
No,
Okay.
should be actually improved road frontage, it should be an improved road.
It should be improved road.
It should be improved, you can
Okay.
have a right-of-way, but to actually get a building permit, you have to have improved road.
Improved road. Okay.
So I mean, they can still have that right-of-way go through that wetland, but as far as road frontage is concerned, the code enforcement office looks at, it has to be actual road designed on it.
Okay.
Or it's gotta be a waiver or something from you.
No, I just
Or
know
the
we've
Board
done
of
that,
Appeals,
we've done it
actually.
in the past.
Actually, it's the
I
Board
mean,
of
long
Appeals,
past,
yeah,
Many moons ago.
yeah, many moons ago.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay.
And I did put together a quick memo today, which I know you haven't had a really chance to see, and it's really going forward, probably more with the next review. I just had a couple things. Even though Nicholas Drive is there under the private road, we do just ask to know what the site distance is off 85 where it intersects. And we'll need to see what monumentation you have for the road itself, for the layout of the road. You already touched on the road association and sizing of any culverts that you have to place. We'll just need the stormwater. If you've got any cross culverts, I don't know if you do or not. You've kind of got the road super elevated to a certain extent. And then just utilities, where are you doing it electrical? You're going overhead or underground? I don't know if the board has any concern about that.
Well, it's supposed to be all underground now,
For subdivision, but.
subdivision.
Yeah, but this isn't,
True.
it kinda hits that. And then lights, I don't know if the board wants to, or we should, if there's a need for at least one light, maybe out at 85 where the road intersects.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a pole, is there a pole out there?
There is, because there's overhead power that comes into the site now, so.
Maybe just something installed on that pole, at least so we have that intersection lit up, just one light. And then whatever you have for that, we'll look at that other revised terminus that you've got there now. And then I do think at the end, we'll need a note, just talking about the future division of that property in the back, just clarifying what the terms will be if and when that happens.
Yeah, it has no road frontage, so.
It has no road frontage,
would
but
need to come back.
we'll just need to note that for any further division of that property, you'll have to come back to the board for an extension of the right-of-way base, for the extension of the private road.
Private road, right?
Because you've got, that has frontage now for that one lot and for Andy's lot, but if that other lot that's owned by Brown, if he wants to do another lot, he'll have to come in for a right-of-way extension, come back to the board.
Yeah, that'd have to be 5 years down the road anyway.
Right.
so,
Or unless he comes in for a subdivision, I mean,
Correct.
which I don't think he wants to take that path, but.
So on that same point, I guess I'm confused a little bit. So Nichols Road exists, a portion, and then you're proposing that you extend it.
Yes.
And that extension will include building it to standards for 4?
4 to 10.
4 to 10, that's the increment that they fall into.
So what about the part of Nichols Road that's already built? Does that need to be beefed up
Yes,
as
they,
well?
in my review, I've asked that they confirm the depths and the width of that.
Gotcha.
So if it doesn't, they'll either have to beef it up
Gotcha.
with gravel or extend it out a little bit. I think it meets the width. I don't think
Yeah.
that's the issue. I think it's more the material underneath.
Right.
We just want to confirm that putting those additional trips on it withstands and the loading.
And then the only other question I have, I don't know if we do this in Raymond typically, but do we want to include in the plan numeric addresses for these lots?
We've discussed this about getting this on subdivisions going forward. We haven't made that part of our ordinance.
Yeah.
It would be helpful, and if they were willing to work with Kayla, I think it would make some sense to put it on this plan. Just makes everybody's life easier going forward when they're trying to get permits or electrical, information to utility companies that the addresses are established.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, I think.
We can get it, it's helpful for Caleb.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
workflow.
that's a great idea. I mean, we might want to even look at that.
That's one of our items that we have going forward on the subdivision.
Right.
I don't know what we do in site plan, but we've talked about that, getting that information right on the plat,
Mm-hmm.
so that going forward, we know the addresses, so it's not time consuming for Kayla to do
Right.
it.
No, well, we'd have to at least modify or add to our ordinance
Right.
requirement. But-
Yeah, right, we have to add it to
Yeah.
the ordinance, yep.
But that would be a great thing to do. That's a good idea.
Does the applicant have any questions for us?
Not specifically, I would say that, it sounds like from our conversations that our intent would be to work with staff and hopefully get this advertised for the July meeting for a public hearing, and provide the additional test pits and just some information on the existing portion of Nichols Drive with hopes that we could get final approval at that meeting. So if there's anything, if the board, needs to discuss whether a site walk's warranted or anything like that, we'd like to just try to get as many of those items discussed here so that we can hopefully work towards a final approval in July.
It's pretty straightforward, the road,
The
some of
road
you
is
may-
there.
Yeah, I don't see, on this one, I don't see it, the grade is pretty, it's got one section at 7%, but that's coming off almost the end of the driveway now, but then what they're really designing, they're at 4.7%, so it's not very steep down at the bottom. It actually levels off to 1% near the end, so it's not like the one you dealt with tonight that comes in at a steep pitch near the road.
I think the only concern may be the amount of wetlands that you're showing here, is to make sure that you can show us the building envelopes are outside of those wetlands. That would be, I think, probably one of the major, that we would need a sidewalk. So,
Yeah, we can provide that, we can show how a building would sit on that
Yeah,
lot and everything, we can show that, yeah, that's not a
Yeah, I think if they give, that's why I'd like to have that overall plan, because I think it clearly defined, you can clearly see how that lot shapes and how a building could fit on that.
yeah, we don't require that, but I think it's.
We don't, but
But at times it's very helpful.
if there's a footprint that we feel is squeezed, we can request that
Yeah.
show us how it fits.
And you're okay with that?
Yeah, we're happy to do it, yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
So other than that, I think the only thing the board needs to do is just make the recommendation that it be placed on the July agenda with appropriate materials.
Time for the notice.
We have time to note. I think that's one of the things we'd like to do is like get the notice out, and then we'll work with them. The notice has to be 7 days prior to the meeting, so we do have some time.
You don't have a lot, though. Don't you have to get that out to them before?
A week before they have to run it, so,
Yeah.
yeah, Jim and I discussed that today, we'll do
Okay.
that.
So if he gets this information in the next week, we'll have time to do that.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion to do that. I mean, if the application comes in,
Okay.
then it could,
Yep.
I think we can schedule it.
Okay.
I don't wanna do the motion and put that in,
Well, it's fine.
things
Just as long as we
happen,
have
right? And it may not, the
Yeah.
application may never show up.
Just because right now, the way it's set up in our chart and flow chart, the due date was today, but actually they've got a little more time, we can get the notices out. So it's just really give them an extension of a week to get the materials in.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with that.
Okay.
And even though we're talking about it as a sketch plan tonight, we did submit an application.
they have an
and everything.
application
Yeah.
in, so. I think it's just really kind of working through these final pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll be more than okay to put this on for the public hearing in July.
Yeah, I have no objections. The board, okay? That- Okay, all right, yeah,
All right, so that's all I
okay,
got.
that's
Yep.
it, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think you're up again though, aren't you? Don't we have another one? Aren't you, don't go away yet?
Yep.
We have, oh, no, wait. Oh, we have, let's continuation of the sidewalk.
Well, first of all, the next order item was Aroma Joe's.
But no one's here. Is someone here?
No,
No, so.
no, I'm just saying, we should just formally just say that no one's, just formally say that no one attended, so we're not,
Okay. So said. Because,
yeah.
It is dropped from our
Just so the
agenda.
board, just so it's on the record that the board acknowledged that
Yeah.
it was on the agenda and no one appeared, so we
Probably a
tabled.
good idea, I understand.
So we're going right into a review of the site walk for this evening.
So
Can we lead
were
off?
they here
Sure.
for you?
Yeah,
Yeah, they were here for
that was
Dickens
Andy
Drive.
and Walter that were
They
here,
were
the
the
two
owners of
owners of the
Dickens
other
Drive.
lots, yep. All right, so again, for the record, Dustin Roma with DM Roma Consulting Engineers, representing Keystone Investment Properties. This was a project that we conducted a site walk with the planning board this evening. It's a proposed 4-lot residential development. It's a redevelopment of an existing single-family house lot that was part of an approved subdivision. We viewed the driveway coming in, the parking areas, and the proposed building envelopes. We identified the area that the driveway was going to be expanded away from the property line, so it's this side of the driveway here. We're expanding it out so it's a 20-foot width. It'll be almost twice as wide as what it is currently. And we do have parking spaces proposed in front of each of the buildings. We've got 2 spaces for each dwelling, plus a couple of extra spaces on the end right over here. So feel we got adequate parking for both residents and a few extra spaces there. Because a big concern in situations like this is that this area does not get used as a parking area because it's dedicated for the turnaround. So we've received a memo from the fire chief indicating his recommendation for the requirement of signage along that, and that's perfectly fine. We're okay with that.
You're gonna pave that, is that correct?
Correct, yep, yeah, that'll all be paved. The driveway is paved now, and we're gonna widen it out, so all that there will be paved. We've completed an HHE 200 septic system design for the project, assuming 3 bedrooms per dwelling, and that was staked out in the field. One of the concerns that was discussed while we were out there is the proximity of the edge of that proposed leach field to this hole that was on the edge there. So as you can see here from the proposed grading, we're proposing to carry out the fill along the end here and completely fill in that hole and bring that grade in there, so that would reduce the potential for any sort of breakouts that could occur if that was too steep. The stormwater coming down from the site, one of the major components that we're designing around is dealing with the water that comes down off the hill and directing that in and around the buildings, but not trying to concentrate that in any one area. So what we're going to do is we're going to just bring that around these 2 buildings here, but maintain a flat slope along this pavement area and this lawn area. So the water, as it comes across here, will sheet across the pavement, and then we'll go down over. This is, a fairly steep slope as it comes down through there. We're actually going to be making it a little bit more gradual to fill it in down over the embankment. And then this area is a very flat, wooded, pretty densely forested area that we were seeing with this ridge line that runs down in through here. So what it does, it kind of collects all the water and just kind of sits in this area right here, pretty much soaks into the ground, and then if you were to get a big storm event, it could potentially kind of make its way down this way, and then there's road culverts along Roosevelt Trail. But we think this would be a good area that currently provides some levels of stormwater management through infiltration, and it'll continue to do so through the development. And we're agreeable to making this all a deeded forested buffer that would be for stormwater management and would also provide visual and noise buffering for the residents of these buildings. Existing well is located here for the property. We have, with this leach field being here, the leach field for this adjacent building is here, and the well is further down on this side. One of the things that was discussed at the site walk was just the tree limits for this property are fairly close to the property line. So in cutting this additional area for the leach field, there is that shed building that's here right now. In cutting that out, there potentially could provide some view openings here in between the two properties. So this area seems like it's going to maintain fairly wooded. I don't think we're going to need to cut as much as I'm showing here for that leach field. Now that we have the final design for that with elevations, I'll be able to accurately depict where that line is actually going to be for the forested area. And if we do end up opening a couple of areas in through here so that you can kind of see between there, we're happy to plant a couple of evergreen type trees in there to just kind of continue that forested buffer line through there. One of the items that was brought up in the revised email that came through on the fire chief's recommendations here, he included his initial review memorandum, which I believe we've complied with this plan set. There was one additional concern just about the geometry and the steepness of that driveway coming in. So that's something that we're going to just have to work with him on and talk to him about. He talks about a 10% slope in there. The slope of the driveway is actually closer to 15% there now. So I just need to be able to have a better understanding of those angles that he talks about in his memo in the slopes, and we'll make sure that he's comfortable with what's out there when we come back to you. Yep.
There's really no way to change that slope.
There's no way to change it, but I want to make sure he's comfortable.
Right, no,
yeah.
I'm
just
I'm
need
just
to make sure that
curious.
with the geometry that when he, clearance of his vehicle and turning
Right,
radius
when
and
he
everything
makes
like,
it turn.
So he'll just have to work with him on the design to make sure the fire truck is.
If we have to widen out a radius or something,
Yeah.
or we'll work on that.
Okay.
Something. So it'll be a more specific design than just looking at what's the slope of the road.
And I think the other thing he was looking for was a note to make sure that it would be sprinkled.
Yep. Yeah, so we're agreeable to that. Buildings will be sprinkled. This plan's showing overhead power going into the buildings, but as we discussed, due to the length of those runs, I think the best bet would be to go underground from this existing pole that's here. This pole also serves to provide overhead power to this adjacent building, but the intent would be to go underground from this to serve over to the two buildings. Yeah, we can also provide some information as to site distance at that driveway. Again, we're utilizing the existing curb cut there, but we'll provide that information on the plans as to what that site distance is.
Sitting out there at the shoulder of the road,
Yeah.
people do go by at a good
Oh,
clip.
Yep.
The other thing too, Dustin, that I noticed was check that, see if there is a culvert there. It appears that there must be, but if it is, I think part of the board will require you to clean that out and rip wrap both ends, because I don't think it's protected with rip wrap, and I think it's probably plugged solid.
Yep.
Well, you're widening it anyway, right? So you're gonna probably.
Yep, we're widening it. I mean, in all likelihood, we'll probably replace the
Yeah.
culvert in entirety, but well, at a minimum, we'll clean it and extend it. But
Yeah.
if it's a CMP culvert now, we'll probably just rip it out and put a new HDPE one in there.
Do we want to think about making sure there's a little bit of riprap there so it doesn't get replugged?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll do that.
That's
for sure.
part of the, if it, for replacement, that would be a standard design anyway.
We're showing riprap on the inlet there, but again, we can clean it out and put riprap on the outlet as well.
I think you covered most of our concerns from the sidewalk there.
Okay.
Yeah, the only other thing I'm just putting it out there is from the, microphone, from the edge of the pavement down to the tree line, what is that slope, or what do you project that slope to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a 3-to-1 slope there now, and we would be doing, we're gonna have some rocks left over from this,
Yeah,
that might
I'm
be a
just
good
thinking we
spot
might
for
need to
those.
bury, I know you wanna be able to push snow there, and I don't have a problem with some openings, but I do think that you know, you're gonna need something there, cause somebody could easily go off the edge of that pavement and roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
Well,
Yeah.
Good point.
So I thought of that as we were all standing on the edge and just kind of looking over that.
Yeah.
where the pavement was gonna be. So we had that really big pile of rocks that are here. We're gonna find some more rocks when we dig for this foundation,
Yeah.
and when we put in that leach field. So the intent would be, I might push this shoulder out a little bit more to get it off the end of the pavement, but we'll line that right up with those big boulders along the edge there, just to give it a nice barrier.
Yeah.
But something that the water can get through.
Some of the water get through and maybe an opening so you can push a plow or push some
Yep.
snow through or something too.
But I don't want somebody backing out of those parking stalls and going a little too far, and I want to make
Or
sure.
an oil
I'd rather have them hit a rock than go over that hill.
Right.
You think we could get the hammerhead, I know that, a sign, a no parking sign, but could we also get it labeled, fire lane or some, the actual top,
Like
blacktop
pavement
itself,
paint?
paint, so that we can, cause some, people don't always pay attention to no parking signs next to their house.
Yeah, and that's gonna be pivotal too, cause to your point, for deliveries, for oil trucks or anything like that, they're
Right.
gonna have to utilize that.
Everything's in there,
Right, so I mean, we really can't have anything in there.
no,
Yeah, because we're intending to stripe these parking spaces anyway, just because, we don't want someone taking up two of them, so.
right,
Yeah, that's reasonable, we can do that.
okay.
Paint it.
And I think, I mean, I know you covered it, but I think the other concern of the board was that, buffer that the adjacent property has cleared right to the property line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can't make you plant their property line, but I think the board's major concern would be that there is some sort of buffer between the two. Where those actual trees go in is more,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think we're not gonna tell you plant here, since the property is owned by both people, same person.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can maintain that buffer by planting a little bit on the other side, that's
I
fine
think
too.
I think where the nearest point of what he's showing there is the septic system. I think if you kinda take care of that corner of the septic system,
Right.
I think you'll.
Yeah, this
because
is,
it's all
this is the
low
trouble,
You're right.
that's right
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
And also, that's a straight view between the
Right.
buildings, so I
Right,
think this
right.
is the spot. I'm gonna just show some,
I just showed
plantings
3 or
there,
4.
just so
clusters.
Fine,
it's
so,
safe,
and
yeah.
if we just have some sort of note that it's
Yep.
going,
The-
once it's all done,
The other piece of this too, Dustin, that you might wanna consider out from the stormwater side is you get all that water coming down to the back of these units. Obviously, in the wintertime, they're not gonna get much light in there. You may wanna put an under drain or something in there as part of your foundation design or something, maybe you oversize it, cause I just think you're gonna have a lot of ice and a lot of water in the back of those that may be problematic in those slabs or basements. What are you planning to do is it on slab or is it gonna be foundation basement?
these are probably gonna be on slab. I don't think we're gonna dig it down 8 feet,
So you still may wanna just get that water out of there, cause you don't wanna build it up with ice flow in the back there.
Yep. What we may do is just run a piece of under drain right across the back here, and then just outlet it out here.
Cause you're gonna have
maybe.
foundation, you're probably gonna, even with that, you're still gonna
Yeah.
want some foundation drains, and
Correct.
if you do, just make sure you've got it rip wrapped and protected and everything.
and then Jim's other comment on the corner of that leach field being so close to that drop off. I think,
The drop off here?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in this case, we're gonna fill all that in.
You're
so
gonna fill
that's-
that,
Oh, yeah.
okay,
Yeah, so
Yeah, they're
that-
gonna have quite a bit
all
of
in
cut.
through here is where that's where the steepness is now.
yeah,
It's gonna be nice and flat, right out as a projection of this. It's gonna be nice and flat lawn, because this will be a nice kind of flat grass area in through here. And then we'll just continue that slope right down, so that'll push right out, nice flat slope, filling in that hole.
Yeah, just show us
Well-
show us the earthwork, that's all.
Yep.
yeah, we're gonna lose all that vegetation then.
Yeah, so I mean, back to your point of the landscaping, we may have to enhance that landscaping a little
Right.
bit
I
more,
mean, if you're
but
gonna fill
we need
that
to
area-
we need to see what they project for grading and what that impact will be.
Okay.
We'll
But
work with them.
if you're going to wanna do this on an accelerated time,
Yep,
then I think that we're gonna want to see, if you're gonna fill, you're gonna be killing off
Yep.
the landscape that's there, so it's gonna have to show some landscaping.
sure, yeah. And like I said, since we've produced this plan, we now have the final septic system design, so I'll be able to actually set the grades and show exactly what we're
Okay.
gonna have to clear.
Okay, were there any concerns, questions?
Likelihood of this one will be on back in July, they have an application in, and so the likelihood this will be back in July.
In July as well?
Yep.
Okay. Anything
Good.
else?
That's all I've got. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you.
from the standpoint of communications, the only other thing I've got, because we've already done the extension for Murray Drive, would be your seats here at the table, the chair,
Oh, yeah,
vice
that's right,
chair.
we have to do the election.
We've kind of pushed that back. We can either push it back to the beginning of the next meeting, or you can just take care of it this evening.
We could take care of it. Before we do the election, I do want, before I forget, I am gonna go before the selectmen on their next meeting and just talk about what we've talked about on private roads and accepting roads, and whether or not we could move for an ordinance change that would allow us to kind of do that as a possibility.
For having the town,
Yeah, just as a quick recap,
yes.
what was it, in 2000, our last big development cycle, the state put out different proposed plans that could be used for towns to incorporate into their ordinances. We actually did one of those, that was our open space ordinance. Another thing that they put out was to have a major road through a subdivision connected at two ends. So it may connect by two major roads, or it could connect into another subdivision, which then connected into
So basically a
major
loop road,
basically a loop road.
right.
The benefits to that are trash collection, school bus route, and emergency vehicles. The downside to that, from the development side, is that that those lots become a little less valuable because they're on a major loop road. So
Through traffic.
yeah, through traffic. So as you know, the tool in the toolbox, if we wanted to kind of push a particular development in that direction, we would need something to entice the developer to do that. And one of the what was recommended out of the state was that the town would accept those roads, that they would be built to town standards, and then the town would accept that road as part of the subdivision.
Right.
That would be some benefit to the builder, just like in open space. The open space concept, we allow for a smaller lot size. That's a benefit with more lots. So that's not really, I mean, we can move in that direction and do a lot with that, but it really is a policy decision as to whether or not the selectmen would even consider moving to accept town roads.
Right.
So before, I thought that we would start working on such a development for the town before the next cycle hits. We might as well go to the selectmen and say, you know, if we start working on this, would you even ever consider taking the road? And if the answer is no, then we just don't have any, you know, we just don't bother continuing. If they say yes, then we can kind of continue to put together another package that we can put in as an ordinance, just like we put in for,
And maybe when you do that, you know, you have to have
Open
a
space,
list
thank you.
of the pros and cons in both scenarios. If we don't do this,
Yeah.
here are the pros and cons. If we do this, here's the pros and cons. Because to your point, there's a lot of smaller roads out there, private roads, some that have come in for subdivisions, some that have done the 5-year increment subdivisions. All these roads are not town roads, and where are they as far as maintenance goes?
yeah, and the
Emergency
problem,
access, and if that doesn't happen, taxpayers tend to go to you guys anyway down the line if these roads and they can't afford it. You know, that's what's going to come down to at some point. This has happened. It's a progression from the urban areas moving out. Wyndham's faced that in the past, and as you move out further away, it's just a growth issue that we're going to have to deal with. I understand the economics of it, but we do have standards that say town standards with the understanding that they will be public roads, so.
yeah, unfortunately, you can't assign a number to it.
Right.
You know, you can't say this is gonna save the town X number of dollars,
No.
or it's gonna cost town X number of dollars,
No.
because it's going to be different for every single subdivision.
It is.
And it depends upon, you know, where the subdivision is. But,
What's the advantage to the developer to have a public road other than not having the maintenance?
Well,
and
to his
association?
point, if it's a dead-end road, the marketability goes up because it's private.
Right.
But they're on a homeowners association, so they're responsible for that road. There's a cost to having that privacy. If
Right.
you have a public road, now they don't have to take care of the road. There's a benefit to them as far as cost. So the question is the benefit of losing your privacy but gaining a public road?
Right.
Right, but the developer really doesn't gain or lose. I mean, once it's sold and into the homeowners association, the developer generally removes himself from that. And then to bring the road for a subdivision up to a town standard versus a private road, me just looking at it off the rip here, I mean, there's a big difference there in your grade, in your depth, in your
Yes.
width.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, I mean, the advantage as a contractor, I don't see it. I mean,
Well, I don't necessarily think we're doing this for the benefit of the developer. I think we're doing it for the benefit
Sure.
of the homeowners and for the development potential of the properties in general. Because what we end up with is this dead-end road, there's a parcel behind it, it's blocked.
yeah.
You know, even if we do put a connectivity right away to that back piece, it's essentially blocked because now you gotta come back through to all those property owners to get the connectivity.
Yeah.
And
So
the other thing we can do, as we did in open space, is we can reduce the lot size or the road frontage along the loop road.
Right.
So that the developer would get an extra lot.
Well, that's why
to-
he said, you know, what can we do to entice
Right.
the, because I mean, obviously, you're gonna have to do.
I think if
Yes.
you're looking at this, these would be the open space subdivisions for the most
Right.
part.
Yeah,
These
okay.
wouldn't be your typical 4 or 5 lot subdivisions. These are gonna be 12, 15 lot subdivisions.
Sure.
But it really gets back to just kind of master planning the whole development out and the parcels around it in the
Right.
vicinity. It's really taking the 10,000 square foot view versus the just over the treetops.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of long-term planning, it really falls underneath that, you know,
Mhm.
and where are we gonna see that happen, you know? But we do have a lot of parcels out there that are very large, you know, and I don't know where we are in the cycle of building, but obviously we're in a good cycle right now. And, you know, you've seen a few,
It's picking up.
it's picking up, and it's gonna move out this way eventually.
Yeah, oh, no, that's for sure. But I think that in order for the town to I mean, pavement, everything else, drainage, I mean, are we gonna defer people from wanting to develop here? I mean, adding that extra cost is, you know, that's a big money issue.
Well, yeah, I agree, and I don't think we're looking, just as open space, we're not looking at mandatory.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
We're-
optional.
We're looking at an optional.
Okay.
And optional in the sense that it would be beneficial, or at least an equal trade-off for the developer, as for the town.
So we're not saying this is where you're gonna do this, it's gonna be an option,
Right.
hey, if you do this.
We can do this.
Okay,
If you're willing
yeah.
to do this, then we can do this.
And I think one of the other things that you gotta look at is the environmental impacts. I mean, as much as, you know, gravel roads are nice and cheap, they do create a lot of environmental impacts with the runoff and the sediment transport they have, which gets into our lakes. You know, I know people talk about the hydrocarbons that come off the pavement, but that's a short-term situation. The stability outweighs the gravel issue.
I'm just looking at it from a construction, just the additional,
Absolutely.
that
You know,
upfront cost.
And trust me, if the select board does, you will have debate between
Oh, yeah.
developers, you know,
Sure.
but I think the way you do have to structure it, it's an option.
Yeah.
You know, it's another tool in the box that you can utilize that everybody's, hopefully it's a win-win for everybody.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the open space, you know, we haven't had an open space, I don't know if we had one while I was not here, but, I mean, that is allowed
Well, essentially,
us-
the only one we've had is the one that was really reapproved, Valley Road.
Yeah, so it's allowed us to move the development within this developed area to maintain snowmobile trails,
Sure.
to, you know, to leave.
The number of
more rural.
lots is the same, it's just the lots are smaller, the infrastructure's smaller.
Right.
But the idea is that if you can get pods of these going with interconnectivity, it's much more beneficial than to have them dead end.
Yep.
Now, how would a developer go about, so you'd have to work with that next subdivision?
Well, you'd
get
look
them-
at the land layout and you just would allow a right of way to continue to at least have access to that property free and clear.
Yep.
So that if it's a public road, they don't have to go back to that development and ask for permission rights or anything
Right,
like that.
right.
It's a town road, they just extend it.
Yep.
Where right now, all we have is private roads, the chances of that happening are nil, so then you end up with this long loop, and then you'll end up with this long loop, and to your point, there's no connectivity, there's, you know.
Or you're connecting to a dirt road from a subdivision to somebody else's dirt road that it can nowhere handle the traffic
Right.
that, you know, and then,
If
so
a-
then that subdivision.
Right, and even though they're private, there's still town services on them for trash pickup and
Mhm.
things like that,
Mhm.
you know, so.
So if I could just comment a little bit on, I worked in the town of Gorham, and the difference between a subdivision that was on a private road, I mean, they got the plowing issues, they got the maintenance issues, so most people there, most potential buyers, wanted to make darn sure that road was gonna become a town road. And I think that's gonna happen more and more in our outlying areas, and I know I live in a subdivision now, private road, we gotta maintain it, we gotta somehow pay for paving, we gotta pay for plowing, whereas someone in a subdivision in Raymond or a surrounding community that's on a town road, the difference is astronomical in cost. So, yeah, there's a privacy concern, but man, it's, you know, it's weighed against that expense thing, and geez, am I gonna have to chip in 20 grand in 10 years to be my share of paving this thing? I mean, people are really worried about that.
Right. And then the other problem is that with a lot of homeowners associations is, there is no homeowners association. It's on paper, but it doesn't necessarily exist. And those get to be substandard, and then a lot of those may be on town contracts for winter maintenance. Well, town still goes in and may damage its trucks, or you know, or fire prevention goes in and they can't get in because it's too wet in the spring or whatever. So there's life and safety sometimes involved with these things too.
I think the likelihood of, I think the cost, I think, is what they're gonna, at the selectmen level.
Oh, yeah, I'm not expecting this.
Oh, yeah.
I have no illusion that they're gonna jump up there and, oh, yeah, let's do that. But, you know, it's worth asking, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and to your point, until that policy changes, we're spinning our wheels.
Right, so it's no
Promoting it.
sense,
Right.
no sense spinning if we don't have to.
Right.
So that's a good place to start.
That's,
Sure.
all right, so the last order of business is we need it's election time. Of office, chair, vice chair.
I nominate Bob for chair.
Any other nominations?
I nominate Ed for vice chair.
Well, let's do one at a time.
We'll do two.
All right.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
You
Good
deal,
touch.
you want a ticket together?
Yeah. All in favor? Opposed?
Okay.
Okay.
Bob and Ed.
I move we adjourn.
Second. I got you. All those in favor? Done.